Throughout the webinar, feel free to use the hashtag tourismww to keep the conversation going. And for your record, so you guys know, this will be recorded, so it will be available for you all afterwards. At the end of the session, if you do have any questions, if you have any comments or concerns, feel free to reach out. There is a question section where I will spend some time going through those, just answering your questions and then providing you with a little bit of extra feedback and insight around items that we may have missed. Before we dive right in, I do want to spend some time just talking about some of the different items we're going to be going through over the next couple of weeks through these webinars. And what we have on our deck consists of the following items. So next week, we're going to be talking about Facebook marketing. Today, as you can see, we're going to be talking about blogging and content creation. On the 25th, we're going to be talking about Twitter marketing, how you can use Twitter to really drive traffic to your site and increase awareness. And then finally, on April 1st, we're going to talk about some of those new networks that are starting to make the news, that are really turning some people's heads, and how you can apply those channels to tourism, to your organizations, and to your companies, including Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, etc. What we're going to talk about today, though, is blogging and content creation. I'm a big fan of blogging, big fan of content creation, content marketing. It's something that I think everybody can benefit from. And we're going to talk about what those benefits are. We're going to talk about why you should be creating content, why blogging is important, why developing and telling your story through content marketing makes a lot of sense. But before we dive right into that and start talking about the benefits, I think it's important that we go back to the beginning. We talked about this last class. We talked about how there's a 3-step process for all buying decisions. We talked about how it all begins with inspiration. So when I talk about inspiration, I'm talking about the user actually finding you, or at least thinking about you. Thinking about Nova Scotia as a destination, thinking about Yarmouth as a destination, whatever that may be. That's the inspiration stage. We get that when we're browsing through things like Pinterest, when we're on BuzzFeed, and we're seeing an article and it says something like 5 things that you didn't know were in the East Coast of Canada. Whatever that article might be, all of these different pieces of content, all of these stories that we're sharing, conversations that we're having with friends, all of these things are combining to create that inspiration. That moment when we can actually kind of create a story in our minds of what it would be like to visit Nova Scotia, what it would be like to drive along the Cabot Trail. That's where inspiration comes from. After that inspiration takes place, we go into a mode that's called research. And research is when you've kind of gone through the threshold of being inspired and saying, this is somewhere that I actually might want to go, to a place where you start thinking to yourself, all right, now it's time for me to do some digging in. It's time for me to really research and understand whether or not this is somewhere that would serve my needs. So if I'm a mother of 2, I'm going to be looking for places that are child-friendly. I'm going to be looking for places that have playgrounds, that have child-friendly sections within a restaurant. I'm going to be looking for all of those types of things. Based off of some of the stuff I'm saying, you can clearly tell that I don't really know what a parent would look for. But what I'm saying is, during that research stage, you're going to be looking at TripAdvisor to find out whether or not a resort is going to be a party resort, or whether that's going to be a place where you can just hang out, have some nice glasses of wine, and relax. That's what takes place during that research phase. And then finally comes that decision phase. And the decision is when somebody actually goes to your website, makes a decision around whether or not you're the right business and a service provider for them. Now, when I talk about all of this, when we talk about inspiration, when we talk about research, and when we talk about that final step, which is the actual decision, one thing that's important is to understand how content and blogging can influence every single step along the way. The content that you're developing, the YouTube videos that you're distributing, the articles that you might be guest writing on other blogs, the content that's being created by the media, the Facebook posts that you put up showing your beautiful views. All of those things can tie back into the inspiration process. When it comes to the content that you've uploaded to TripAdvisor, the reviews that you've actually responded to on Yelp, the blog posts that you've developed and are showing up at the top of Google, all of those items fall into that research category. And that's why content is so important. Because finally, the content that you have on your site is also going to have an impact and make an influence in the decision that people make. So when they're visiting your site, when they're reading about you, They're going to be on your site consuming what? Content. So when they're consuming your content, when they're reading your blog, it's up to you to ensure that the content and the story that you're telling there is something that's relevant, that is content that really connects with your audience and content that drives home that conversion. So now I just want to spend some time talking about some of the stats that we reviewed last time. This one here is very important, and I mean, it's really straightforward, and I think all of you guys already know this. But at the end of the day, when you start to think about your tourism destinations, when you start to think when you think about people who are planning a trip, where do they start? They start with Google. They start their search by going to Google, typing in your destination, typing in something like hotels in Nova Scotia, bed and breakfast in Nova Scotia, places you have to see in Nova Scotia. That's what they're going to do a search as soon as they get on Google. No questions asked. That's what's going to happen. One of the other options that people are tending to take when it comes to that inspiration, but it's not often in that search and hunt phase, is the social networking and video sites. So what's happening here is that people just so happen to be watching a YouTube video and they become inspired. They could be just scrolling through their newsfeed on Facebook and they see a friend who uploads an album of pictures on the Cabot Trail, albums of their friends downtown Halifax. Wherever their friends are visiting, that content is being uploaded back to Facebook, uploaded back to Twitter and channels like that. And people are becoming inspired to say, hey, that's somewhere I want to go. That's somewhere I need to visit. That's somewhere I would want to take my family. The internet is the number one planning resource when somebody's planning a trip. When you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, think about your own travel behaviors. When you're going somewhere, you're going to sites like TripAdvisor, you're going to Google to find out more information. You're going to these channels, you're going to these places where you can find content that will answer your questions. So when you go to Google and you type in, what are the best coffee shops in Yarmouth, you're hoping that you're going to get the answer that you're looking for. When you go to Google and you type in, where is the best pub on Eastern Shore, you're hoping that you're going to get an answer. And so are other travelers. So are other people who are going through this process. They're looking for this information. They're looking for those online sources. And they're using Google to find it. The website and the internet is where it all begins. And that's the reality of the world we live in today. It's no longer a very linear process where you can simply put up a big billboard, scream at the top of your lungs, and see a wave of customers start coming into your door. That's not how you're going to get heads in beds and bums in seats. It's not going to happen that easily. If you want it to happen easily, you need to be willing to recognize that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen easily. It's going to happen from you being willing to put in the time and put in the effort. And a lot of the stuff we talk about today are definitely going to fall into that vein. These are not tactics and tricks that you can turn on a flip of a switch and succeed with. It's not going to happen that quickly. You're going to have to put in a lot of effort. And the reason is simple. Every single week on Facebook alone, there's 3.5 billion pieces of content shared. Links, news stories, blog posts, photos, images, all of these things are being distributed every single week on Facebook. And sure, don't get me wrong, 2.5 billion of that is probably cat photos and baby pictures, but the rest of that content is content competing with you. It's content that you can actually beat, because you're not going to beat a cat photo unless you have a cat farm, but that's a whole different story. So what you need to think about, what you need to consider is how can you stand out with all of this content being distributed. This is just on Facebook alone. If you take this quote from Eric Smith, and this was back in 2010, he said, every 2 days, we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. That's crazy, but it makes sense. I mean, think about it. Think about how often every single week there's something new going viral, whether it's in a cat video, whether it's the ice bucket challenge, whether it's a video of celebrities reading tweets that are mean about them, whatever it may be, the dress going viral. Every single week, there's a new piece of content that is going viral. There's a new piece of content being distributed, being developed. I mean, this isn't a lie. Like, this is real, and the facts speak for themselves. WordPress, one of the most popular blogs blogging platforms that you can use is one that I strongly recommend. I strongly recommend that you consider having your blog or even your website hosted using WordPress. It's a great resource. It's open source, so it's always evolving. It's always getting better. And it's one that you can do great things with. But one piece that I want to point out to you is that 61.8 million new posts are published every single month on WordPress alone. That's just WordPress. That's not medium.com. That's not Tumblr. That's not any of these other blogging sites. This is solely talking about on WordPress's platform. So what does that tell you? If it tells you anything, it's again reiterating the point that you could create the best blog post ever and it still get lost in the noise. People want your content. I mean, people legit go to Facebook looking for this content. They go to Google looking for this content. They're looking for the stories and the answers to questions that you can answer. So when you're asking yourself, okay, is there a point? Yes, because people want that content. It's just hard to stand out. You see, 90% of consumers find custom content useful. And when I talk about custom content, I'm talking about content that you've developed yourself, content that is very specific to your industry, to your location, and that people would connect with. The next step, 78% of people believe that organizations that provide custom content are interested in building quality relationships. So that's everything. I mean, 90% of people find that content useful. 78, nearly 80% of them think that you are trying to build a strong relationship with them solely by creating custom content. So why would you not do it? Why would you not do it? Well, we know why, because it's a lot of work. So let's just say you decided, okay, Ross, I'm going to buy into this. I believe you. I understand the value of content. I can see why it's important. How does one stand out in all the noise? There's a lot of noise out there. Well, the way that you stand out is you follow a few of the tips and tricks that we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share with you some tried and tested strategies that I know will work and will allow you to stand out in the noise. But the first thing you need to do is you need to understand the landscape of content marketing as it stands today. And it's broken out into these three tiers. It's broken out into brand content, which is content that you as an organization or as a company create. Media content. Now, this is content that you can influence, but you can't necessarily create. So this is content that the Chronicle Herald might publish, CBC might publish, CTV might share, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, whatever that may be. Any story that is being distributed on a media outlet is called media content. And then we have user-generated content, and that's the content that your customers create. And this content is, of all three of these different types, the most trusted source. Now, what does that mean? Well, this is when we're talking about reviews. This is when we're talking about testimonials, quotes from people who have actually experienced your service, your business, your offering. That's what user-generated content is. And what we need to understand about this triple threat is the fact that we control our brand content. Brand content is something that you control. You create that. You develop those blog posts. You develop those photos that are going to be shared. And as a result of all of that, the content that you're developing is going to influence both the media and the users. And the content that the users are generating are also going to influence the media. And the content that the media develops is going to influence both you and your users as a whole. So as you can see, all of this is intertwined. Everything is connected. The content that you develop is going to influence your users and how active they are. The content that your users create is going to impact other users as well as the media, and it's even going to force you to make changes. All of this is an intertwined triple threat where you need to understand the landscape to be able to tackle it effectively. So why would you tackle it effectively? As soon as I talk about user-generated content, a lot of brands start getting scared. Oh, they're going to talk negatively about me. Oh, they're going to say nasty things on the Twitter. Well, guess what? You can't control the conversation. The conversation is going to happen whether you like it or not. The only thing you can do is influence that conversation. And that's what my goal is today. It's to show you how you can influence that content, influence those users for the better and for for the positivity of your brand. A quick marketing fact. Companies that blog get 55% more web traffic than those that don't. Companies that blog get 55% more web traffic than those that don't. That number is significant. And the reason why I love this stat and the reason why I point to this figure over and over again, because I'm sure some of you have heard me say it before, it's because these numbers speak volumes. I mean, just think about that for a second. You have the opportunity to have 55% more traffic than your customers, than your competitors, sorry. You have 55% chance to make a customer. That's 55% more web traffic, which means 55% more people on your website learning about your brand, learning about your story, and 55% more people who could possibly tell a friend about what you're doing, what you've built, what you're selling, what sales you have. That is a huge opportunity, because guess what? As you can see on the left, those 55%, that 55% also results in 70% more leads. 70% more leads. That's significant. Now, whether or not you close those leads or not is a whole different story. But if I said to you, for a couple extra hours out of your week, you could generate 70% more leads, which also could translate into 70% more business if you're good at closing the deal, would you take that? Would you do it? I think any good business person would agree that it's probably worth it. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Numbers like this are amazing. They speak for themselves. They speak volumes. And by the end of this workshop, this webinar, you're probably going to say, okay, I'm ready to go blogging. I want to make this happen. And I'm confident that you could. I'm confident that anybody, any organization, if you follow the steps that we're talking about and you take these tips and you execute on them and you implement them, if you are not finding results, if you are not able to see an increase in your traffic, if you're not able to really kind of make an impact with the story that you're telling, I will give you a day of my time for free and show you exactly what you need to do differently, because I am that confident that blogging can change an organization for the better. So what is blogging? What is blogging all about? Well, blogging is very simple when it comes down to the format. The format is broken out into 4 different steps. It all starts with creating content. Now, we're going to talk about the different types of content that you can create over the course of this presentation. But when it comes down to creating content, it's really 2 different types that you can create. You can create content that is compelling, and you can create content that is remarkable. Now, what is compelling content? Compelling content is content that really connects with someone on a human level, meaning they've searched for it, meaning it's something that is very localized and hyper-local, something that answers a question that you've been asked frequently, something that is intriguing, something that is timely, whatever that may be. That's compelling content. To give you an example of what a compelling blog post would be, if you wrote a blog post and it said 5 places in Nova Scotia you need to visit before you die, that's a compelling blog post. If you wrote a blog post that said 5 picturesque views that you need to to take a selfie at in Nova Scotia, that's a compelling blog post. If you wrote a blog post about the 5 hidden gems where you need to eat in Yarmouth, that again is a compelling blog post. That's the type of content that people want. Now, the second type of blog post is a little bit more challenging to come up with and a little bit more challenging to create, but it can be done. And all of those topics and those titles that I said could fall into this category with the right approach. It's remarkable content. Now, let's take that word for a second. Remarkable. Content that's worth making a remark about. Now, if the content is worth making a remark about, then the content is going to drive a conversation. And if your content is driving a conversation, you're going to have people talking about your brand, talking about your story, talking about whatever it is that you wrote about without you actually being there. They're just going to have a conversation. People are going to be tweeting about it. They're going to be commenting about it on Facebook. They're going to be having comments directly on your blog. That interaction is going to take place. And when that happens, when that engagement is taking place, what you're going to see is something magical. You're going to see a community. And when a community is developed, when a community starts to build itself and a community starts to take on a life of its own, you're going to see something magical, because that's when people start engaging one-on-one, where relationships start being developed without you actually being there. And as a result, you're no longer just seen as somebody who blogged. You're no longer being seen as someone who wrote a blog post that started driving a bunch of comments and remarks. You're going to start being seen as an expert. As an example of somebody who's done this extremely well, you can look at the Red Stag. Now, they didn't necessarily do it from blogging, but they've done it from content creation. They've created content that constantly is talking about this concept of caring counts. That's remarkable on its own. Caring counts. So they're talking about how important it is to show people you care. They're giving out free Tim Hortons to people. They're going above and beyond for their actual customers, for people who walk in the door. And as a result, it's gotten the city talking. People are talking about them on Twitter. People are talking about them on Facebook. And what has ultimately transpired because of that is that there's been an outlying community developed where people are having tweet ups, they're talking about caring counts, where people are referencing caring counts in day-to-day conversations, and the Red Stag is benefiting from that. And at the end of it all, the people behind the Red Stag are able to be seen as experts in the act of caring. So they've been able to follow this very well. And I think any organization, any company can also take a stance in creating content, which drives conversation, building a community, and establishing themselves as an expert. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. All of these things are going to have to take time. It's not going to happen 2 weeks from now. It's not going to happen 2 months from now. It might, but it's unlikely. You have to be patient. Don't just leave this webinar and say, oh, I have to start creating content. I have to write some stories. I have to publish this. Oh, I'm not getting any traffic. I failed. I quit. Don't do that. What you need to do is you need to be patient. You need to take the next month or two to just create a bank of content. Create a bank of content that you can then republish and redistribute later on. That's what you should do. Don't jump into it. Be patient. Plan to ensure that come September, you actually have other blog posts that you can put out there. Plan so come October, you already know that you're going to write a blog post about Halloween, so just have that post on hand ready to be written and published. You have to be patient. So, what else do you blog about? What other stories can you talk about and share on social that'll actually connect with people in a meaningful way? Well, today you are you. That is truer than true. There's no one alive who is youer than you. Dr. Seuss said that. And I think that it's important that you understand that this is one of the key underlying factors in blogging. This is one of the key things that you need to recognize and understand when you're creating content. You have to talk about what it is that you do, what it is that you offer. Because at the end of the day, it's those things, it's what you offer that people are going to be looking for. They're going to want you to write about the amazing fish and chips that you sell. They are going to want you to write about the events that you're hosting. That's what they're going to want you to offer them. Beyond that, people want you to create content that follows these 3 E's. It's content that either educates, engages, or entertains. Now, let me explain what that means for a second. Content that educates. Content that educates people is content that provides them with knowledge and insight and information that they didn't have before, but content that they really would like to be informed of. So this goes into the vein of 5 places in Nova Scotia you have to see before you die. You're going to educate people on where they need to visit. Engage. Content that engages people is really when you start having things like the 4th annual Kimpton Pet Photo Contest, right? Like that's content that is engaging with your user. It's engaging with your customers because you can start asking them to submit photos of their dogs. And that's engagement. It's when there's a 2-way interaction taking place between you and your potential customers. And then finally, it's that entertainment side of things. And entertainment can come in a whole bunch of different ways. It's not necessarily like make you slap your knee laughing, ha ha ha, that's hilarious, you should be on Comedy Central. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about content that simply puts a smile on someone's face, makes them feel good, makes them feel inspired, or gives them some type of positive feeling. You look at the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. You see Daphne, our newest director of pet relations. What an amazing approach. All they've done is they've taken a dog that probably stays at their hotel, and they've said, you are the director of pet relations. The dog doesn't have to do anything different. But what's going to happen is their customers are going to be entertained. They're going to laugh, they're going to smile, and who knows? If you think back to that triple threat for content creation and content marketing, the media might even pick up this story and run with it and say, oh, look, this hotel has elected a actual dog to be their director of pet relations. So educate, engage, and entertain. Whenever you publish a blog post, whenever you're about to put out a story, make sure that the content that you're distributing, the content that you're about to publish, falls into one of these three categories. One other approach that is really popular as of late is the idea of newsjacking. And newsjacking is also known as reactive storytelling, which means you're reacting to something happening in the news. You can see this this little diagram, and it's really demonstrating when you need to jump into a story. So let's say, for example, we're talking about the dress. If you're unfamiliar with the dress, there's two types of people in the world. There's the people who look at the dress and they see one that's white and gold, and there's the people who see it as black and blue. A lot of brands, when this whole phenomenon started going viral, jumped on top of the bandwagon and newsjacked, meaning they looked at this opportunity and they started pushing out content that was a combination of both a reference to that pop culture, but also a reference to their brand. So they would take that post about the dress and they'd show their own product in white and gold and say it was black and blue, just to make people confused, make people smile, to entertain them. And that content generated significant shares because it was timely, because the interest was just about to pick up. And that's what drives conversation on social. If there's something taking place, some type of breaking news, whether it's someone, the lights going off in the Super Bowl, like it happened a few years ago and Oreo jumped all over it, whatever it may be, anything that is breaking news, if it's not a highly sensitive topic, if it's something that's not going to offend people, it's probably an opportunity for you as a brand to jump in, combine it with a marketing message, and do something clever and funny. Once you newsjack, journalists are going to be scrambling for information. And when they start scrambling for information, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I've seen some of the people who created content for the dress, and the newspapers and the articles that were starting to be published afterwards were actually taking quotes from these brands and pushing them out. We're taking the content and articles that these brands were developing and pushing them out through the media. So that's a huge opportunity just on its own sense. So when we talk about content, we talk about marketing and how to create viral stories, it's impossible to ignore some of the most viral websites of all time. It's impossible to ignore things like BuzzFeed, Upworthy. These are some examples of sites that develop and deliver high quality content on a regular basis. So when you look at these sites, you have to think, okay, what can I learn from them? What can I take from BuzzFeed as an inspiration that will allow me as an organization doing tourism to create better content? Well, there's a lot of things. I'm going to quickly share with you some of the rules for creating a great headline, but these are some things that they kind of use as a general consensus in terms of what they would consider quality content. The first one is heat maps or maps in general. So if you were to take, for example, recently with the weather, if you were to go to Google Maps and you were to create a custom map that pointed out all of the places where it would be a good idea to make a snow fort or a good idea to make a snowman, and you just put that on Google Maps. I know it sounds a little bit weird and it might not be that relevant to you as an organization, but if you did that, the media would take your map and they'd share it for you. Heat maps are a high quality piece of content. They're a high quality piece of content that customers want, users want, and that the media would have no issue sharing. The next one is big, delicious full screen images. I mean, we are visual by nature. When you think of humans, you think of human instinct. There's a reason why the first books we get when we're kids are coloring books. It's because we're visual creatures. We are visual by nature. I think there was a study that found that human beings are able to connect with an image 80 times faster than they can read an actual sentence. That speaks volumes. I mean, what that tells us is that it's important that we include visuals and images throughout all of our content, through the content that we're distributing on Facebook, through the content that we're distributing through our blogs, through our website. We need to place an emphasis on having captivating images. One opportunity that I mentioned last time, and I'll mention it again, NSTA has a great opportunity for you guys where you can actually access images. If you reach out to them and you just ask for access to a library of content, they have images on hand that you can use freely on your own sites, on your own social media channels, so on and so forth. So I strongly recommend that you reach out to them and access that content. The next piece is curated video content. So the concept of finding a video when it's going viral and then just republishing it on your own site. I don't really know how that would translate into the tourism world that well, just because I don't think you guys should be necessarily sharing videos of cats and anything that's not really relevant. But if, for example, you've seen a video that was amazing and an amazing clip of somebody driving a motorcycle on the Cabot Trail, and you're located on the Cabot Trail, that's a piece of content worth republishing on your blog, giving full credit back, but just giving that piece of content a new life. And then finally, we have listicles. And listicles are just like what you're looking at right here in front of you. It's a list. It's a list of key points, and people love lists. We've all seen them. 8 reasons why you should do X, Y, Z. 52 examples of X, Y, Z. All of those things are just lists. They're just strong, powerful, engaging lists. This is an example of compelling content. Now let's talk about headlines. Headlines are something that will make or break any blog post, any piece of content you develop, whether you're talking about a tweet, whether you're talking about an article, no matter what you're talking about, if the headline itself is not captivating, is not interesting, you are going to lose a click. Think about it. When somebody shares something on Twitter, what do you see first? You see 2 things. You see possibly an image. After that image, you're going to read that headline. And if the headline sounds interesting, you're going to click the link. Here are a few tips that the folks from Upworthy had as it relates to creating a perfect headline. First and foremost, don't give it all away in the headline. So if you're creating a blog post that is titled something along the lines of the one place in Dartmouth that you need to go for fish and chips is John's Lunch, they're not going to click it because they know what you're going to tell them. They know that you're going to tell them to go to John's Lunch. Instead, what you need to say in your headline is, OMG, I went to this place in Dartmouth for fish and chips and it was amazing. You won't believe where it is. That's a link that somebody would click. Don't give it all away in the excerpt, the share image, or in the text. So when you share something on Facebook, there's always that little tiny bit of text underneath it. You want to ensure that in that text, in that message, you're still not giving away the tip. You don't want to give away the surprise. You want to make somebody click it if they want to find out where they should get fish and chips. You want to make someone click it to find out where they should take a selfie on the Salt Shore. That's what you want. You want people to click on that content. Don't be shrill. Don't form an opinion for the end user. Let them do that. Now, that's an important piece. I talked about remarkable content, and a lot of people often just think that that means being controversial. That's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you to just create content worth talking about. That's all remarkable content is. It's content worth making a remark about. So don't be too opinionated and feel as if you need to make an opinion for your user as a whole. Don't bum people out. You can't make people sad just from reading your title, your headline. You need to make your headline captivate people to be interested. You don't want to make people sad. People don't click sad content. They click things that are going to inspire them, that are going to make them happy, or content that's going to make them feel angry more than anything. Sadness, of all the emotions, there was a study done is the one emotion that doesn't drive shares, doesn't drive clicks. So don't bum people out. Don't sexualize your headlines in a way that your mom wouldn't approve. That means don't swear in your headlines. Don't put the word sex probably in your headlines either, unless that's something that you're offering in your business of some sort. Don't sexualize your headlines. You don't want to kind of make your headlines controversial. And don't overthink it either. Like, that's the next point. Don't overthink it. I know that it sounds like these rules are very hard hitting and heavy, but at the end of the day, some of your headlines are going to suck. You just have to accept it and keep writing. You need to come up with your headlines quickly, follow the rules above, and ensure that the content that you're developing is actually lined up with those headlines. You can't just use overly sexualized headlines just to drive a click. You need to ensure that they're lining up, because if I click a post and that post doesn't deliver, I'm going to be more upset than ever. And then the final two, don't say the word sucks in headlines. That's not really that great of a tip, but I mean, one of the key points that they found is that mothers are the most frequent sharers on the internet. So you don't want to make content that would offend them, make them upset. And then lastly, you want to be clever, but not too clever. You don't want to be so clever that people don't really get why they should click your link. A lot of people make this mistake. You don't want to be too clever. Here are a few examples of articles that you could really use for yourself and say, yeah, these are some types of blog posts that I could write. 33 things people from Nova Scotia have to explain to out-of-towners. Simple as that. That's a compelling piece of content. 30 things you need to know about Dartmouth before you move there. Again, very simple, to the point, but it lets people know exactly what they're going to get when they click on this content. 15 restaurants in North Carolina that will blow your taste buds out of your mouth. Again, this is a BuzzFeed style headline that would drive somebody to click. And within this, if you're an actual bed and breakfast, for example, you could seed this content with all kinds of restaurants that have a significant following, and then ask them to share this on their own Facebook accounts. And if they share it, you're going to reach their audience. And if their audience is clicking on your content, you're driving more eyeballs to your brand. This dad ate our porterhouse, and I can't believe what happened next. These are a little bit more challenging to come up with. Like, you need someone to actually be a dad and eat your porterhouse to write this post, but it would be amazing if something crazy did actually happen after he ate the porterhouse. 3 women in a row ordered pad thai. What our server did for the 4th was so touching. OMG. Again, lots of emotion in this title, a lot of intrigue in this title as well. They're talking about OMG. OMG on its own is going to help drive that click. So touching. Again, hitting that emotion of, if I click this, I'm going to feel good. I'm going to feel positive about reading it. But you have to understand your audience. I'm not suggesting that everybody starts creating BuzzFeed content. What I'm suggesting is that you understand the foundation of what types of content gets shared on social, what types of content people want, what type of content people click. That's what I'm trying to deliver to you guys as an underlying insight. But at the end of the day, you need to understand your audience. You need to know what your audience actually wants, what type of content your audience is actually going to want to click. That's marketing. Communicate your value by understanding your audience and answering questions that they would have. That's how you're going to be able to stand out. That's how you're going to create content that resonates with them, and content that really drives shares and ultimately sales, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's about creating content that resonates with people on a deeper level than just creating content for the sake of creating it. Now, I'm going to talk about the famous 4. And the famous 4 is essentially types of content that are consistently the famous 4 is content that has been known and found to constantly deliver and develop results. So the first one is list posts. We've talked about this. They're oftentimes pointed as lazy types of content, but lists are going nowhere anytime soon. People love lists. Studies have shown that when people create content and they share it in a list format, people are more likely to read it. People are more likely to click on that post and more likely to consume that content. So don't Don't stray away from list blog posts. It's a great opportunity for anyone. How-to guides. Developing a how-to guide on pretty much anything that your audience would be interested in or looking for is going to drive a significant amount of traffic. Let's say, for example, you're a tea host and you sell tea. If you created a how-to guide for steeping the perfect green tea, and you had visuals, you had rich text, you had quotes, maybe you even interviewed some tea connoisseurs to get their insights, and you put all of this together into a nice blog little package, people would love that content. They would link it, they would share it, they would read it, and some people might even print it off. And when you have that type of engagement, when you have that type of interaction taking place, you've created something that is truly going to do wonders for your brand. Another type of content is the XYZ reasons why. People just love being told what they should do and what they should know. They also get a kick out of learning about something before other people. So if it's in an easy to read format, that makes it even better. So if I said to you, these are 5 reasons why you should eat at this restaurant, you're probably going to click it. You're going to click it and you're going to consume it. If I said X reasons why gluten-free menus are the best on the East Coast, you're going to click that. If I said X reasons why the seafood in Nova Scotia is better than it is in Moncton, you're going to click on that too. Just creating that content that tells people information that they didn't have before goes into that engagement platform, goes into that engagement place where you're creating content that is going to engage, it's going to possibly even entertain them, but it's most importantly, definitely going to educate them on something they didn't know before. And then finally, creating that ultimate resource. If you can create content that is an ultimate resource, content that people really look at and say, wow, that had every answer I needed on the whole concept of tidal bore rafting, or it gave me the ultimate guide, the ultimate resource for adventures in Nova Scotia. If you listed every single adventure opportunity within Nova Scotia, that's going to drive traffic, that's going to drive links, people are going to bookmark it, and they're going to read it over and over again. If you created a guide on all of the best places to go fishing in Nova Scotia, again, what a great resource that would be. People are going to download it, they're going to consume it, and they're going to share it on a regular basis. Those are the famous 4. The famous 4 consists of listicles. Example of a listicle, 55 reasons why you should visit Nova Scotia this summer. How-to guides, an example of that, how to find the best lobster sandwich in Nova Scotia. A reasons why post, 5 reasons why you need to visit Nova Scotia tomorrow. Ultimate resources. I mean, we just talked about those. It could be as simple as the ultimate guide to outdoor adventures in Nova Scotia. That's an ultimate resource, and that's something that people would want and people would download. Now, one thing that I've noticed on blogs and websites that is really doing yourselves a disservice is not having these social plugins installed. You need to be installing these types of things on your blog. You need to encourage people to share on Facebook, share on Twitter, email, like it, even put it on Google+, even though nobody uses it. All of that type of engagement and interaction that takes place with your blog is a positive one. You want people to take these types of actions because that's where distribution takes place. A lot of people get caught up in the whole idea that content is king. Yeah, if content's king, distribution is queen. I take it so far that I would say content isn't king. Distribution is. If you create something and nobody sees it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't exist because no one could consume your content. So it's important that you install these plugins so your content can actually be distributed. Another quick tip. You want to break out your blog posts into paragraphs. You don't want it to just be a block of text. Break it out into short paragraphs, long paragraphs, and in doing that, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to have conversations with people. When people are reading your content, they'll be able to quickly and more easily be able to scan through your posts. They'll be able to see that it's mixed up, so they're not going to feel as if they're just reading an essay for every single point. Another thing that you should do is you should look at channels like Reddit to find content inspiration. What type of stories should you tell? Reddit is a great resource for that. And really, guys, at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to is just understanding where your audience is spending time, what type of content they're looking for, what type of content you can create that will honestly connect with them and allow you to build that meaningful relationship. And it's easy to take all of what we've discussed and say, all right, I'm going to create some of the most amazing blog posts ever, but I would never recommend that you do that. I would say before you actually go out and create content, start planning for the next 3 months. Write the content before it's actually time to publish it. Write 3 blog posts. Write 3 blog posts that you're going to publish a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Have that content sitting in a database. Just use Microsoft Word if you have to. And then distribute that blog post once your blog is actually live. And then once you've done that, it's time to think about 2 things. One thing, it's time to think about, okay, you've created all of this great content. How are you going to market it? How are you going to get it out there? And how are you going to distribute it to people who actually care? That's the next question. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few webinars. We're going to talk about how you can distribute your story, how you can distribute the content that you're distributing and writing through your blog, and how you can get that content in front of the right people. That's what we're going to be talking about. Thank you guys for listening. Really looking forward to that.